Following on from our last Automobilista 2 video, we had quite a lot of comments where people were complaining that they can't tell where my forehead starts and ends, as well as comments saying that we needed to try Daniel Kart's custom force feedback files as they completely transform Automobilista 2 and rectify all the problems that I drew attention to. Well, I loaded up AMS2, we changed some car settings, I got the custom force feedback, and in this video I'm going to tell you what we discovered and explain how force feedback can affect people's perception of racing simulators. This video absolutely will be traumatic for sim racing fanboys, so subscribe to have the power to unsubscribe, click the like button if you want more of this drivel, and thanks to all our channel members, Patreon members and financial backers. Without you, we wouldn't be able to upset so many nerds on the internet. Now, before you get your pitchforks out, let me again state very clearly what I always say about AMS2. I think this is a very entertaining game to play. I think it's fun to drive. I don't think it's the worst handling racing game or simulator out there. I think it's great in VR. I think the AI can be fun to race against, especially given the AI is terrible in most other racing games. It has some amazing car content licenses, track models, fantastic graphics and track details and car model details. Some of the cars, lots of the cars sound great. It's easy to start a race with friends and fill it with AI for fun jumping multiplayer racing. Again, with trucks, go-karts, whatever you want. Take it seriously, do it silly, doesn't matter, lots of fun to be had. And crucially, Reza, keep doing loads of polish to this, keep adding to it, keep improving it. You know, you really can't complain too much. It's good value for money, it's well worth having. And I'd say it's especially worth owning if you're newer to sim racing, if you can get this on a sale, and again, you just want something to jump in and have some fun racing with your friends. Oh, and for VR headset testing, particularly good for that. One of the better looking VR games out there that will run on lower end systems. The quality to performance in this game is probably one of the best quality to performance games on the market. Right, with that in mind, let's now go into the physics again, and specifically the Daniel Kart force feedback file. You can just watch our previous AMS2 video where we jumped in the game after having not played it for a while, and I told you what's good and bad about the game at this point in time. But using Daniel Kart's force feedback file, I have to say it is a really nice force feedback file and does give you really nice feel for what the cars are doing, does make things through the force feedback in many ways feel more connected, and certainly would make a lot of people feel that the cars are a lot more connected, and would generally make a lot of people feel as if the cars are less hovercrafty and slidey, and it will also make a lot of people feel as if the cars are a lot more controllable and a lot less likely to do the Automobilista 2 weirdo bin from when you lock the wheels from braking too hard deep into the corner. So it's a force feedback file that definitely makes AMS2 more immersive in feel and easier to drive. So I think he's done a really good job there, and I think if a developer was going to aim for some kind of force feedback or type of force feedback that a lot of people would really enjoy in any simulator, this is a good custom implementation of force feedback. That said, the default plus force feedback is totally fine and actually conveys what the vehicles are doing more than good enough and better than most simulators on the market. I think AMS2 in general has always actually had very good communicative force feedback, and I have to say the Daniel Kart's force feedback, though great for immersion, details and making it easier to drive, does in many ways actually do force feedback a bit back to front and does give you a bunch of forces on the wheel that really don't make that much sense. You can just get used to it and drive it and it will make the game easier. But for example, the big thing that it has that really helps in terms of making the cars easier to drive is a very aggressive seat of the pants self-correcting load force. And that basically, when you get oversteer, the wheel automatically applies countersteer for you, which you can then use to allow the car to effectively drive and correct itself. It's a bit like how the seat of the pants option operates in iRacing when you use Marvin's Apple Mirror, but I would say it actually works better in this scenario, and it's really quite nice in the sense that it gives you a sensation that the tyres are working for you rather than against you. And when you're using the throttle, you feel the counter steer, tug and force, and you could, in many ways, it's kind of analogous to the rotational force you might feel on your body in a real car. It does give you a nice clue as to what's going on, but you can effectively just let it drive the car for you, which it's very satisfying, I have to say. It's quite a fun way to drive, and of course you could turn it down and reduce it so it's more just a hint, which is what I would do if I was trying to use it in a more literal way. But the thing is, though it is nice, I can see how it would make a lot of people find it easier to drive, and it does make the car feel more connected, and it does make it a lot harder to accidentally lose the rear from braking too hard or too much throttle. The thing is, the default AMS2 force feedback is more than good enough for telling you what the rear's doing, how much throttle you've got, and if you're a moderately skilled sim racer, AMS2 is really quite easy to drive and really quite drawn out in a lot of its physics behaviour, especially on the brakes and lift-off oversteer, which this will go into later, which is where the game's completely broken, but it generally just goes into understeer, so that's incredibly manageable by default. And then the throttle behaviour of the game is really, really aggressive, but the steering responds so well. If you're a moderately skilled driver, by default it's super easy to drive this game. Like it's very responsive and very controllable. But sure, Daniel Kart's force feedback I think tells you more clearly what's going on, and I quite like it. I think it's not realistic in the slightest, but I personally, as a force feedback experience, I quite like it. But for me, it's absolutely not needed over the default force feedback. The default game force feedback and physics is very drivable because it's so sluggish and drawn out. And crucially, it does not fix the fundamental physics of the simulator. And this is the fact of the matter is, you can do a lot with force feedback to communicate what's going on with the cars and the handling. You can do that literally with a pure steering rack force, and if you've got a very clear signal for the grip of the front tyres and the load on the steering rack, that will really communicate very clearly what the car's doing. But you can also do it with force feedback that conveys loading forces, seat of the pants forces, and a whole bunch of other stuff, and that can really clearly tell you what the car's doing, but it cannot fix the underlying physics. It can only at best describe what's going on with the physics. At worst, very abstract force feedback can really throw people off, or completely mute force feedback can actually make it that you're not aware of the depth of the physics in a game. Like if you played a driving sim with no force feedback but a nice wheel, you're not going to really pick up on subtle loads and movements that would come through force feedback and aren't displayed visually. So force feedback can be really good for telling you what's actually happening. It can also make a game feel worse, and it can also be completely neutral. But it cannot fundamentally fix a simulator's physics. And again, after this test using the Daniel Kart's force feedback, which I think does, to be fair, I think it does emphasise aspects of AMS2's physics even more clearly than the default force feedback. It makes it even more clear the fundamental issue in AMS2. We went through a whole bunch of cars in AMS2 when doing this test, and the big issue is when you get on the brake, there is seemingly no weight transfer, or it doesn't come across like there's any weight transfer in the handling to the front tyres for the braking to be used to trail brake the car properly into the corner. When you brake in AMS2, it's a case of the car will slow down, and so that will allow you to corner tighter because you're going through the corner slower, and or the grip is seemingly being reduced from the rear, so the rear rotates, but it's not like you've actually got weight on the front of the car and the car has nosed in. And you will notice, even if you open the diff, even if you lower the front ARB, even if you change the spring rates, you really can't get out of this behaviour of the cars driving like a solid plank of wood with a single wheel in the middle, or the four wheels but you're just removing the grip from the rear, and that's the braking phase of the corner with the sim. Is super bizarre. And then on the other side of it, what you find is the total opposite with the throttle behaviour, in that when you get on the throttle, you have magic mega steering authority and magic mega hookup of the fronts. It's almost like the opposite behaviour of what you would expect in a real car and most other simulators. An example of how this really affects your driving in Automobilista 2 compared to other simulators and real cars is that there's scenarios where you'll be going through a corner and you notice you've gone a bit too hot, so the front's washing out a little bit. In a real car, you might lift off to rotate the car gently. If it's a Porsche, it'll rotate very easily. Some cars less, you know, you have to lift off quicker or induce oversteer in other ways. And if that doesn't work, then you just dab the brake a little bit and that will immediately load the front up and you can get a bit more turning. Obviously, it will depend how much you're understeering, but if we're just talking about you've got a little bit of understeer, a little bit of washout happening, lifting off or a little bit of brake will generally allow you to nose the car in. In Automobilista 2, you're actually better off yanking the wheel a bit and jabbing the throttle, because the throttle causes the front to immediately bite in and hook up through the corner. In just about every other simulator, if you do that, you will induce more understeer because the fronts are already towards the limit of their grip, and getting on the throttle, you're taking weight off the front of the car generally, and you're just going to induce understeer. Every other sim you trail brake or nose a car in, as I say, in AMS2 it's like you've got to get on the throttle to turn it in. Every vehicle in the game has this weird, amazing throttle hookup and terrible braking lift-off oversteer behaviour. And you could think, oh well, you know, I say could be ARB, could be differential, but you can change the diff power and the diff coast to try and massage this, and all you end up doing is either increasing the chance for snap oversteer or snap rotation on braking, rather than actually getting the car to roll through the corner properly. Because it's like, it's as I say, it's like there's no weight transfer in some ways, or it's back to front weight transfer, and then it's also like you're not driving using the differential, it's driving by minusing grip off the rear tyres. Obviously, driving itself and slip and how you rotate cars is, a lot of it revolves around the tyres gaining and losing grip, you know, but I don't know how anybody can play this game and not notice that. It's so stupendously obvious as a totally bizarre way of driving if you're trying to drive this quickly. I'm not saying it can't be fun. I'm not saying that the content's not really great in it, but I am saying this is absolutely not how real cars drive. I'm sorry. And it's absolutely not how... we drove PMR after this to test it, and PMR is very sloppy, more sloppy than AMS2, very like boaty car handling, but the cars, you drive them from the pedals properly, like the throttle. If you give it too much throttle when it's already got a bit of understeer, you'll, at best with a neutral car, the whole car will sort of push out, and when you brake, the car noses in, or if you lift off, the car rotates nicely and noses in. LMU doesn't have this problem. AC doesn't have this problem. Even iRacing, which I think has mental physics, if you're under the limit, if you use the accelerator, and you'll wash the front out if you use it too much, and if you get on the brakes or you lift off, the car will turn in with quite a progressive roll. AC1, absolutely superb for this. Live for speed. This behaviour is only really prominent in AMS2 and Project Cars 2, and it's how you have to fundamentally drive these games. It's just how you play them. You go into a corner a bit too hot so you can take advantage of the mega hookup throttle as best possible. But yeah, so the force feedback or setup does not address this nature of handling in this game. The force feedback file is great, guys, but no, it's not gonna fix the physics. Camera settings, they can, for sure, if you have the cockpit locked to horizon, the cameras, the car looks like it's bouncing up and down, sure, that can absolutely make it feel like the suspension's over the top and you might want to lock it to the car more, but that's not changing the physics. Someone that's experienced with simulators knows what's the camera and what's the underlying physics. Car setup, sure, you can really change car behavior, make them more or less agile, more or less grippy, aero, all ARB, diff settings and everything, spring rates. You can absolutely make a car a lot less sloppy, a lot more responsive. There's a lot you can do with setups, but what you'll find, and this is in every single simulator, the underlying physics are still going to be shared between every vehicle. Like the tyre model, that is the primary thing, but also suspension, drivetrain and other aspects of the physics, those are really what define the handling at its core, and the setup is more like icing on the cake for you to get the car to generally, within the physics profile, to actually navigate around the track optimally for track pace. I'm not saying, again, I'm not saying you can't drastically change car handling or make a car that's unruly a lot more tame or vice versa. I'm not saying that setups can't drastically change how a car handles. It absolutely can. But if you're a moderately experienced sim racer, you can really tell what the tyre model and physics are like with a somewhat neutral setup or a bog standard setup, and in many cases even a somewhat broken setup or very bad setup. You can still identify the general nature of what a tyre model in a video game behaves like and what you need to do to then drive that. It's just because that's the underlying math that defines how the vehicle moves. You can't magically fix it with the setup. So all told, I'm not saying you can't have a lot of fun playing Automobilista 2. I mean, all the fanboys of the game have left the video to type an angry comment already, so well done those of you that are still here. But I'm not saying you can't enjoy this and that it's not, like, I think this is way better than Forza, Gran Turismo. Aspects of this are better than AC1, iRacing, LMU. I'm not saying all of it's terrible. There's components to the handling in this that are really interesting, like some ways that the tyres load up, some ways that you can hold the slip. The actual detail possible with the force feedback is above many other games. Probably one of the top games for the actual clarity of the force feedback out of the box from the game itself. The problem is that where the physics are messed up is a super crucial part of driving. Because the other comment people say is, well, you know, all sims are different and you like this, I like that, everyone focuses on different things. That is completely true. People do focus on different things. Unfortunately, the braking into a corner, lift off oversteer and trail braking, and the process of the handling in slip and the way a car responds to throttle are kind of important. It's kind of the be-all and end-all of driving. You know, it's like how I'd say that the thing with iRacing, many of its handling properties, a bit sloppy and slidey, but many of its properties are really bloody good. The roll into corners. Unfortunately, the counter steer doesn't work properly in iRacing when the tyres are at the limit. You have to drive entirely on the pedals. So, unfortunately, you're as a driver unable to properly push and use snap over counter steer. So, unfortunately, the cars in iRacing, when you're pushing, do not drive like cars. Like, the basics are not covered. And this is an issue that AMS2 has. This is the thing I always say is AMS1, AC, Richard Burns Rally, even LMU in many ways, though it does have some weird slop stuff to it. But there's a bunch of games out there, even Wreckfest 2, there's a bunch of games out there where there are differences. They're not perfect. They don't line up to a single real-world car. And, yeah, like AC's curbing's broken. I don't know, there's loads of issues with these games. But they do what I would describe as the 5 key parts of driving. The basic, fundamental, using the wheel and pedal component they do them, but as if you had like weirdo sloppy tyres or worn out tyres, or you've got a bit of magic stability or something, right? But they do the basics. These complicated sims with complex tyre models don't get the basics right. They do some they do some stuff way better than sims that get the basics right, but they don't get the basics right. It's like doing amazing icing and chocolate coating on top of a cake, but the sponge is concrete. It's like, well, great, the top of the cake's fantastic, and this bit of the cake's really spot on, but the meat, the bread and butter, or the flour and butter of the cake is concrete. That's a problem. I can't eat the cake now. That's what's going on. That's why it's different, and that's why it's important. Is that clear enough? I don't know. Main thing is, if you enjoy it, have fun with it, keep enjoying it. Maybe don't get too good at sim racing, because you will notice this issue and it will probably ruin the game for you. Daniel Kart Force feedback, definitely worth getting. It's really interesting, even if you don't like it. It's very interesting. I don't know if I mentioned it, but it also has like a good sort of vibrational track noise, like texture representation, and that is a really good thing to have to make people feel like they are connected to the road. A lot of sim racers associate a flat force feedback signal that you might get in other simulators that do nice loading force feedback for the tyre grip. A lot of sim racers associate that flat feeling with like driving on snow or ice and just sliding. So that graininess is really good for conveying a sense of the tyres working for you and purchasing the road, and that you're going over a road. So there's loads of stuff in the Daniel Kart Force feedback that I think is really good from a game design perspective, and though abstract, I think it does make the game easier. So it's great. Try it. Academically, it's really interesting and could just make the game more fun for you. Have fun playing the game. Don't get too upset with my critical comments on stuff. But yes, AMS2's physics are really not that good. That's it. Teapot Fish Teapot, you can now get your pitchforks out. I look forward to the comments. I'm sure they'll be rounded and sensible. Till the next one, thank you very much for watching. Happy tea drinking. Take care and goodbye.